topic of freedom, let's talk about beer and beer ads. They've been so iconic over the years. I can remember as a kid seeing the VB ads, the hard-earned thirst needs a big cold beer. And, I wasn't 18 yet. I can tell you it had a big impact on me. And, you know, even in 2010, there was this amazing ad, the Carlton Big ad, which became iconic that year. Very ironic. They had this army of people declaring Carlton, you know, putting it into this kind of level of apotheosis that was ridiculous. But it really landed well with the audience at that time. What we have now is Tooheys New putting out a new ad, and it really seems like it's a back to the future ad. So let's watch this ad and then we'll dissect it from a marketing and communication standpoint.
Backs to the wall, you've given your all, but it could all go wrong. How do you feel? We force you to get the team through, so you power on. How do you feel giving all you got right at the final call? How do you feel? How do you feel? I feel like a Tooheys.
There didn't seem to be any irony in there whatsoever. It was completely authentic in terms of creating this world of the local community rugby player, the man, played for their team. It was a simple goal, which was to make a difference, not necessarily to score a try, just make a difference, and then to celebrate a win with the rest of the team in the traditional manner. So something very traditional here, very stripped back, very traditional also in the portrayal of masculinity as well. And I would say the only difference here is that it's reflecting demographic changes to Australia. So what we're seeing is a Pacific Islander Australian. The Greater West of Sydney, for instance, has huge population of Pacific Islanders from Tonga and Samoa.
My first reaction, especially when they hit the line at the end, I feel like a Tooheys, was really just the fun. First, my visceral reaction was to burst out laughing, right? Because it just seemed, having, of course, witnessed and grown up with all the other ones, it just seemed ridiculous, desperate by the brand. I just immediately thought they've run out of ideas, and they've reached back into the success of the brand's past. I think they were Mojo, those ads, right? They were the people who wrote all those songs. Come on, Aussie, come on, and you ought to be congratulated, and all that sort of, really famous. So forget the fact that it's a throwback and just look at the ad for what it is, right? Just imagine I hadn't seen it, right? So what it's relying on mechanisms that advertising used to use that used to be very reliable and effective, which was the jingle. So the creation of the song, which is what made Mojo wealthy, and that was possible because everyone was watching one TV in the corner of the living room at the same time. Yeah, we knew what it was, yeah. So those ads, those jingles played again and again and again and again. And if you've ever worked with anyone, any producers in the music industry or how all that sort of stuff works, they call them earworms. But in order for earworms to work, it means you have to have a captive audience of people who are going to tune in and actually sit through the jingle, right? Whether it's in the car, whether it's in front of the television. And once they hear it about 20 times, it sinks in and it becomes like a mnemonic thing. Now, today, there is no vehicle in which the jingle can actually be effective. So no one's watching enough television. No one's going to sit through a jingle. On the YouTube ad where I saw it, I think it was a very, very short version of it before you could skip it. It was just a jingle, I feel like a Tooheys. And so there isn't the context by which this music and this song and this jingle can infuse the public consciousness to act as a mechanism for mental availability for the brand, which is what these jingles did. And I mean, they did it incredibly well because the jingle songwriting was really, really good. If I could also make reference to the music, even though it's the same song, It's recorded differently. It has a different tempo. It just does not have the same light-hearted little skipping element that those Mojo songs did. You know, they had this really sort of, they weren't heavy or dirgy or anything like that. This song kind of dirges along, you know, as well. So it's kind of lacking that earworm effect as well. So it's the same song and it's the same ad. Socially speaking, for me, it's a complete throwback and a bit of an act of desperation. And it's really, really hard for jingles to work in the modern advertising environment, full stop. So even that's really, really difficult. And thirdly, the nature of the jingle as well is just probably not the kind of music and the kind of things that are going to kind of really work in advertising in that regard. So I could only really chalk it up as an act of desperation, and we've run out of ideas. So we're going to reach back into something that worked a long time ago, by the way, a really long time ago.
Well, and I think that they've got to be worried about the impact of this ad because it appeals to me. And you know, I'm a 47-year-old man that, you know, that sort of ad was popular with me when I was 15 years old, right? And that was an entirely different realm then. And, you know, I'm not a big drinker anymore. So I'm getting a nostalgia trip, but without actually buying the product. I think it's a sign that there is this crisis with advertising agencies and strategies around using traditional or using the advertising template, television advertising template in the current postmodern environment. There's a confusion around how to advertise now. And there's also, I believe that there is some sort of a culture and attachment within advertising agencies. There's an attachment to that previous era when TV ads ruled and when it was really clear what their goal was, which was to make the big, great ad of the year, get the award, get the accolade, get the status. But unfortunately, the media landscape and the way that people consume doesn't align with that anymore.
And the other thing that we often neglect to mention about the way that we used to watch TV is what happens to people's brains when they were watching TV. So after a while, you enter apparently what is called an alpha state, where you're meditative almost. You know, you're kind of sort of almost unconscious, but you're watching and you're absorbing. And that is when people are at their most suggestible, when they are in the alpha state. And so therefore, firing ads at them when they're psychologically in a suggestible, vulnerable position works really, really well. That's what we used to call passive viewing. There's very little of that nowadays. People are skipping, they're changing. I'm reading comments while I'm listening. I mean, I watch YouTube. I watch YouTube for the comments, right? Right, I'm much more interested in what the comments are saying than what the people are saying most of the time. You know what I mean? So it's kind of it's active participatory viewing, and we're all skipping the ads as soon as we can. Who's this targeting? Because Tooheys new, I haven't heard of. I mean, Tooheys new. There's so many. There's so many brands. This is the other thing that's happened since that ad, the early ads. The number of brands of beer has exploded exponentially since Tooheys new ads were recorded by Mojo.
One of the laughable aspects of this ad is the assumption that the working class are still the same as the working class back in 1985 or 1975. Now, I belong to a soccer club in my regional area. And a couple of years ago, I hosted my soccer team barbecue at the end of the season. Probably about 75, 80% of my team are local tradespeople. They're working class people. Anyway, I made the mistake of getting a case of VB and a case of Tooheys. And nobody drank any of it. In fact, they all went to the bottle shop and bought a whole bunch of craft beer. And I got publicly humiliated and scolded for getting VB and Tooheys new for the soccer barbecue. It was seen as poor quality, as anachronistic, and didn't align with the values of my working class tradie mates who were regularly going overseas on holidays and, had boats and all sorts of things.
The irony of the situation is that marketers, okay, we're generalizing, a guy who earns a lot of money, but yes, tradespeople can actually earn a lot of money. Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a phenomenon at the moment, right? So people who are earning a smaller salary but are working in marketing are basically looking at working class people who are potentially earning a bigger salary, and therefore have more disposable income than they do, and are trying to market those people what your mates call a low quality pleb type beer, given all the craft beers that are on the market. You see what I mean? So the irony of that, right? The irony of that is just absolutely amazing. And maybe that's why I kind of, like I said, the visceral reaction was to kind of laugh. Kind of underneath what that visceral laughter reaction was all those things. Was the throwback? Was the irony? Was how often have we said the more that we in marketing try to put people in boxes and then present these boxes to these so-called people that we think believe in these are in these boxes, the worse things become. It's never on the mark, in that regard. The irony is that demographic is much more cashed up than what we think, and is also consuming media in very much the same way that marketers consume media, which is social media, which is YouTube, which is not watching much television, not watching much advertising.
I think what we've entered into is a goggle box type of paradigm. So instead of consuming ads in that passive, hypnotized way that we're used to, ads are just more content, right? More content for people as communities, as groups of individuals to analyze, to comment, to form dispositions around. And so it's not so much that people are interested in the ad as interested in the interpretive community response to the ad. So we go to the comments when we see an ad on social media or on YouTube because we want to see how people interpret it. We want to understand their dispositions, and we want to find a disposition in relation to that content that fits with our own perception. And so it's just a completely different way of interacting and engaging with advertising.
The only ads that are having traction are the ads that are literally, like as you've said, kind of somehow more content.